Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. I am Kristen Boyce, a licensed marriage and family therapist with a private practice, Pathways to Healing Counseling. Through conversations, education, strategies, and shared stories, we will be closing the chapter on all the thoughts, feelings, people, and circumstances that don't serve you anymore and open the door to possibilities and the real you. You won't want to miss an episode, so be sure to subscribe. Welcome to this week's Close the Chapter podcast. You are here and we're ready for today's episode. Are you addicted to your phone? Do you scroll endlessly on social media? Are you so distracted with devices and technology that it really kind of consumes you? This is the episode for you. I struggle with this too, so I'm not immune to this, and we talk about it on this week's episode. We are talking about how to drown out the noise in this distractible, busy world. Let me introduce you to my guest today. Sarah Boyd is an author, child and adolescent development expert, and founder of educational company Resilient Little Hearts. She holds a master's of educational psychology, a diploma in the neuroscience of leadership, a native of Australia. She now lives in California with her husband and 2 children. And we talk about her new book, Turn Down the Noise, a practical guide to building an emotionally healthy family in a chronically noisy world. We talk about how all of our kids are being exposed to all of this technology and social media at such a young age, and what it does to them developmentally and emotionally. What is it doing to us as parents, being distracted on our devices? It doesn't matter how old your kids are. We talk about what it's doing to relationships, to ourselves, and to others. It's such an important episode. We need to be talking about this more. The impact on family systems, the impact on emotional development, the impact on our psyche and our attention spans. I'm pretty passionate about this topic because I can see what it's doing in my own life, and I can see what it's doing in the lives of children and teens and young adults. If you are working on yourself in any way, this is an important episode for you. Be sure to grab the journal that goes with it. If you've listened to this podcast for a long time, you probably already have it, and I hope it's been helpful to you. You also will get on the mailing list. I do not bombard you with lots of emails. Once a week, you'll get a newsletter with helpful information at Kristen, Kristen, Boyce.com/free resources. Here's my important conversation with Sarah Boyd. Please share this. Please start talking about this and think about what changes you want to make in your own life. Think about putting your phone down, putting it away, taking a sabbatical. We talk about all those things, how to really create space and get back to center instead of living chaos and anxiety. And the phones are creating so much of that, our habits with technology. So think about one thing you want to take away from this episode and really commit and being intentional about doing it. I hope this is an impactful episode for you as it was for me. Welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast. This is a time in our lives, and it has been like this, where noise is everywhere. Like we have so much coming at us. We have social media. We have just environmental things. We have the news. We have family issues. So many things are coming at us that it can feel overstimulating. And our guest today, Sarah Boyd, welcome to the Close the Chapter podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited about your new book, and I love the title. I want to read the title for everybody. Turn Down the Noise. There's a song, I think, that was in the 80s or 90s. It's Turn Down the maybe it's Turn Up the Noise. I don't know.
Yeah. My kids are running around singing it. Like,
yes,
turn down the noise.
I want to sing it right now. I'm like, boom. Yeah. Okay. A practical guide to building an emotionally healthy family in a chronically noisy world. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So Sarah, I'm so glad you're here. Tell us about your journey into writing this book.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to be here. The short story is my background is in psychology. I studied in child and adolescent development, and I completed a master's in educational psychology. And literally the day that I handed in my master's thesis to my university, I got a call out of the blue from my doctor to say that he'd found a lump that was not looking good, and he's clearing his schedule and he wanted me to come in immediately. Then he said the words that kind of turned my world upside down, which was, "It might be cancer." And unfortunately for me, it was. I was 27 years old and I got diagnosed with an aggressive form of thyroid cancer and went through 18 months of treatment. And I'm blessed to say that it was successful. And then 6 months after that, I became a mother. And I think it was the journey of all of those situations all coming in a short period of time that just made me realize as a parent how important it is that we develop our own emotional health and teach the next generation to deal with hard things, because unfortunately we can't control as much as parents. We wish we could just wrap our children in cotton wool and save them from anything bad. But unfortunately we can't. And the only thing we can do is actually grow in our own resilience and emotional health, and also equip our children to do the same. And so that's when I started my work with Resilient Little Hearts and then started the writing of this book. I think that with overstimulation and stress, sometimes we just are not aware of how much it's affecting us. And I wanted to add it to the conversation.
So glad you did, because I think we don't think about the word stimulation. I love the word because people now, my kids will say, my teens, I have teens, 19 and 17, and they'll say, "I'm overstimulated." And I'm like, well, that's a way to be self-aware about your body.
That's
And so
amazing.
how did you come up integrating that word, like that concept of being overly stimulated or chronically overly stimulated?
My work began to take me into talking a little bit more about the trait of high sensitivity, which is a trait and a temperament. It's not a medical diagnosis that about 20% of the population have. And these people are deep thinkers. They're in tune with their emotions. They're often seen as sensitive to the world, but they have a kryptonite, just like Superman has this amazing power to save the world, but this glowing green rock really struggles. And people who are highly sensitive, it's overstimulation. And so I think that's where a lot of my work went into looking into that, because particularly for people with a temperament of high sensitivity, if anyone struggles with background in trauma, sometimes there is like more overstimulation. And also for those who have differences such as neurodivergence, there's a theme there where overstimulation is the thing that is like a kryptonite, is like a struggle for so many. And I am glad that it's coming into the vernacular of more and more people who are beginning to talk about it. Like, that's amazing that your teens are like able to articulate themselves that way, because I think it's an experience in our body that maybe we were aware before of emotions like sad and angry, but overstimulation is experience in our body that now, if we can have words for and awareness for, we can know what to do with.
So what would that look if someone's like, I kind of know what you're saying about overstimulated, but I can feel myself if I'm at a concert or I'm in a big crowd, like I'm like, whoa, like this is a lot. Noise and people and energies. What are the signs if someone's overstimulated?
So overstimulation is basically when your input of senses gets to such a threshold for you that you experience this kind of cognitive frazzle. So it's like you have brain fog, you can't think straight, you're struggling to, if multiple people are talking to you, you can't attend to what they're saying. A lot of the time, it's you're beginning to feel agitated in your body, and you're beginning to feel like this rising sense of your heart rate. For many people, the experience of overstimulation ends up creating in them a big emotional explosion. And so I love that you share actually that for you, it's like maybe at a concert, because I think what most people don't understand is that we all have a threshold of sensory stimuli. Some of us are very sensitive and have a low threshold, and other people, it takes them going to a concert or something like that. For me personally, it can just be as simple as cooking dinner in a hot kitchen with multiple children yelling at me at the same time. And I have that moment of, "Oh, hang on, I don't know what's happening." And so becoming aware of where your own threshold lies, I think, is part of the awareness process as well.
It's helpful to give different examples. So people, you have the bigger examples and it can just be in
Yeah.
the moment, dogs barking, like, and you're trying to focus on something that can be overstimulating. Like you said on the person, how does that affect development? Like if someone's overstimulated in their younger years, how does that affect them developmentally?
So having moments of overstimulation isn't a problem. I think our bodies in a healthy nervous system, we're created to have times of stress and then times of recovery. The problem comes when we're in a chronic state of stress. So if we are just overstimulated all the time, or if there's other stress going on all the time, that can affect development for children and adolescents, but it also affects our lives as adults, because what's happening is we're stopping the healthy flow of the nervous system, because resilience is essentially built by being exposed to stress and challenge and then having times of recovery where the tiger's disappeared, it's not a threat anymore, you can relax, you can ease into safety. And I think that's probably one of the main reasons I wrote this book, is because I'm very concerned that our modern world, for even us as adults, but particularly for our children, is just so chronically overstimulated that they're not actually getting those times of recovery, because that's an important part of the health of the nervous system and our development of mental wellness as we grow older.
So let's dive into this, because I agree. Like, because we have so much coming at our kids. What do you think is the consequence or the impact of what you're seeing now that's happening
Yeah.
with our kids?
So, I mean, I don't think it's a secret that we're seeing rising rates of mental illness in children and adolescents. 1 in 3 or 4 are reporting clinical rates of anxiety and depression. We're also seeing an increase in attentional diagnoses in children across the board. And there's obviously multifaceted reasons for this. One of the ways I think about it is we all have natural vulnerabilities and quirks within our genetic temperament. You know, we're all created differently. We all have differences in who we are. But if that temperament, if that person is put under extreme stress for long enough, we all move to the worst version of ourselves. We all move towards not coping and creating a lot of the time unhealthy coping mechanisms for that. And so one of the things that I wanted to add to the conversation is this environment around, are we paying enough attention to it? Because I think there's so much awareness now of mental health, and hopefully we've really reduced the stigma of people going to therapy and talking about emotions and all of that sort of stuff. But the direction is still not going in the right direction. And so that's why I think it's really important that we talk about this, because for children, when they're at key developmental stages, they're more vulnerable than adults. So if you put an adult under stress, because they are developed, their prefrontal cortex, their brain development has already come to maturity, we're essentially more buoyant that way in being able to deal with stress. When you take a child whose brain development is basically still occurring, 90% of it occurs up to 3 years old, then it's not until 7 years old that the prefrontal cortex, the part of their brain that helps them learn how to navigate the world in a mature way, only comes into basic foundational development. And then it's not until we're in young adulthood, between 18 and 25 years old, that that brain comes to full maturity. When they're placed under extreme stress or chronic ongoing stress during those early years, it can create issues in their brain development, in their experience of mental wellness in their own life.
I really feel passionate about this piece of it, because I get it. I was on probably the introduction of iPads coming in with my kids. So the school introduced the iPad. One of my kids had it in kindergarten. I literally watched their brains change before my eyes. It's fascinating to see what that technology does to brain development and emotional, I would say also emotional development. What are your thoughts on that?
Technology is such a nuanced topic, because I feel like almost all parents feel guilty about it, because I think before I talk about technology, what I want to add to the conversation is I think that the increase of technology in the parents' world has created such a stress for them that a lot of the times they're having to negate 2 screens for their children just to cope themselves. It's not to say that previous generations of parents haven't had stress, but they haven't had the constant emails, the access from work coming into their home life. They're constantly being on. So I just want to nuance that when I say it, because there's not guilt, but to talk about child development and screens, It's definitely one of the things that has been a driver of this for children. There are studies that if 1 or 2-year-old is exposed to more than 4 hours of screens every day, we're seeing delays in their language and social skills at 2 and 3 years old. I think there's interesting experiments going on now where they're taking 10-year-olds who have their own smartphone already and they're just removing them for a month. And even though there's extreme withdrawal like signs in the first couple of weeks, after it, there's just huge increases in their focus, in their attention, in their ability to connect with other people. I am a huge advocate of trying to reduce screens across the board for children. I am not a no screens person. I respect people who want to do that for their family, but I understand that's not always a realistic thing. One of the things I do in the book is outline a framework of like slowly introducing screens in a way that reduces stimulation, from all the ways with just starting from low stimulating television shows for younger toddlers or preschoolers, all the way up to not introducing YouTube until they're a bit older and smartphones when they're, the research shows if you can hold off until having a smartphone until they're 14 years old, there's a dramatic decrease in mental illness and even eating disorders for girls. And so I think it's a conversation that we need to pay more attention to. It's a hard conversation to have because it causes a lot of feelings in parents, and then there's guilt, but they're also in survival mode. But I think if we don't have the awareness conversation piece, people are just going to assume, sure, my 7-year-old can have a smartphone and be on it all day, and who cares if there's boundaries. I know as a parent myself, and obviously I have a background in this, I was clear on what I wanted to do with my kids. I knew that by the time they got to 10, 11, 12 years old, this would be a huge issue. But what I didn't anticipate is in my children's, when they were in grade 1, how many parents in their class were just handing other children just a smartphone. It was the first time the child asked. It was just, yeah, sure, grab it, have a smartphone. It wasn't this wrestle to like hold them off as long as we could. It does make me very concerned about what's happening in this generation with the awareness of how it affects people.
I am too. And I see it's playing out already. And the teachers will report it's playing out already. I can see it in my own self, what it's doing in my own brain. I'm like, my focus has decreased. I'm really taking a look with my own stuff. I think every parent, because it brings up shame. Like I'm a bad parent if I gave my kid a smartphone or I gave them an iPad or I let them do technology or video games or, insert whatever. And I want to say no shame, no shame. It can evoke shame. I want to hold all the tender compassion that's not it's really, that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is I feel like we're on the same page as I almost feel like it starts with the parent in their own usage of the phone. I have to rumble through my own usage of the phone and how my brain is impacted. It shrunk my focus. It shrunk my attention span. And I'm an adult.
Yes. No, it's true. And I want to say too, to that shame conversation, everyone's been there. So I just want to normalize that where we've all at times, or maybe a lot of the time, had that kind of extreme exposure to screens. But I will say too, it's also recoverable. If you create boundaries in your life, it's not like you've done, damage that can't be made up. Things can be made up. So I just want to say that. I 100% agree that we need to look at our own phone use. There's some studies shown of middle schoolers where they say, do you want this relationship with your parent? What do you think stopping it? And everyone would think they would say their own technology use, but they actually say my parents' technology use. And so again, it's a really hard situation because a lot of the times we're not just watching TV or on social all the time. Sometimes it's like you're getting 100 text messages from the school or you're trying to answer emails, or it's not an easy thing. But I do think as you begin to understand your own brain and how it's affecting yourself, it really does motivate you more to create some own boundaries in yourself. Similarly to you only check your phone at certain times, you put it away at night, you don't sleep next to it, you kind of treat it as a thing that you parenting maybe, or like putting aside rather than is controlling you, I think is something to really consider for us as even adults.
And how stimulated is it? Like if you're watching a bunch of news, watch your body's response and how overstimulated you can get pretty quickly. Imagine that for your kid It's
Yeah.
like if they get exposed to things that they don't have the brain capacity to process, like they don't have the prefrontal cortex that has that rational thought, they are consuming things that they can't comprehend. And
Yeah.
that gets stuck in the body and in the brain. And that's what I don't think people realize. Like, why is my kid having a nightmare over this? Well, they were exposed to images and
Yes.
now they're trying to process it in their sleep because
Yeah.
they didn't have maybe even the verbal, they didn't have the words to process
Yes.
it.
Children are very different with the way they process media than adults, obviously. So there's the stimulation side of it in and of itself. But up until a child is 5 to 7 years old, they live in this beautiful world of make believe. Fairies are real, superheroes are real. That's why pretend play is so special at that age. But one of the things that's happening cognitively for them is they often can't tell the difference between what's imagined and what's real. And so, whatever media you're showing children under 5 to 7 years old, even if you say to them, logically, this is not real, that monster isn't real, although some children will say they understand it, most children, as a generalization, can't tell the difference between what's imagined and real. The other thing that happens is children don't have a global sense of how big the world is. So if they're seeing on the news that there's a war or something and you say, oh, it's okay, it's in another country, very, very far away, their brains can't understand. They're very far away is that a 10-minute drive down the street to a local park? And that creates fear in them as well. And so it's important to understand this with children because I think it's important. I am not an advocate of exposing children to news or media that they don't have a real life need to know. So obviously with like psychology and the way we want to support children, if there's an issue happening in their real life, we as healthy adults, we want to talk about it with them. We need to be honest with them. We don't want to pretend something bad isn't happening. If, say, a grandparent has passed away or there's maybe a divorce or something like that, we need to have open conversations. But unless the situation is actually impacting the child's real life, we really need to take pause and think, do I really need to show them about this? Do I really need to talk to them about this? Because until they become older and into middle school and high school and beginning to grapple with issues of the world themselves, it can actually, like you said, I've heard lots and lots of stories of children developing 12 months of nightmares purely because they've seen a scary character in a television show.
I love that you're saying this. The difference, and I want to say it one more time because I think it's so important that children don't know the difference between what's real and what's not real at that age.
Yes.
And we even have a hard time. Like, is that for real?
Yes.
Is that true? Is that not true? Like, we even have a hard time as adults processing some of this information. I remember growing up, there wasn't all that much, I mean, as much as there is now, but my parents would have the news playing in the background. And how many of us now play? I don't, but maybe you have at one point or another played the news in the background and think, well, that's no big deal. It's playing in the background.
Yeah.
Or it's on my phone and they don't really pay attention. They're hearing it. Their body's
Yeah.
absorbing it.
100%. If that's one change parents could make today, I would always say just do not play the news on the television in front of children. If you want to be informed yourself, read it on your phone, watch it after they've gone to sleep. That is in and of itself such a huge gift you can give your children to make your home a safe haven from all this other stuff that's going. Because a lot of times children, they've gone out, they've been playing all day. Maybe they've been at preschool, they've been at school. They've got their own stresses. They've had a fight with a friend. They've got to do schoolwork they don't want to do. They didn't get picked for the sports team. They're already processing stress from their day. You just need to ask, if we look at it, there's no reason they need to know about world events that are happening somewhere else that doesn't affect their real life at this point. So that could be a real gift and a small thing we could do as parents that would have a huge impact for them, for your child.
Thank you for saying that. I'm a huge advocate of that. I also think put your phone down. Like when they are trying to get our attention, and this is hard I'm a parent, I have a company, I'm working. I want to say, I see you, I hear you, I get you.
Yeah.
And I've had to work real hard to make sure when they need me, they want to connect with me. I need to put my phone down even there's studies, and you probably know more than I do, but even if we have our phone like sitting at the table, there's studies saying people do not feel seen or heard because they
Yes.
see the phone right there and you're about ready. Or if you had, and I'll preface, like I might be getting a call, I might be getting a text, just so you know, are you okay with that? But it's like you're talking and someone goes like, picks up their phone and you're like, wait, what? How many times do we do that with our kids? Well, I've
Yes.
got work. I've got work. Well, yeah, they
Yeah.
don't know that though. I mean, they don't understand that. So it's like we just picking up our phone is a misattunement. The message we're sending them is my work's more important than you, even though that's not
Yes.
what we mean.
Yes, 100%. Because I think that is one of the things that's happened with modern life is because we as adults, we're feeling the pressure from our work, from having to get back to other people, from whether it's social media, or even we're so exhausted from our day that we're looking for an out. Because being attuning with our children and attuning with other people, you have to have some emotional capacity left over, some energy left over to give. And if you don't have that, if you've just come in 100% exhausted from your day, it's so easy to go to the phone. And so one of the things I kind of recommend is that you create in your own mind. And I had to do this earlier on because I work from home and I've worked from home for a decade. And my husband and I worked really hard to create boundaries within our home of like, these are our working hours. When my children came back from school, we would put the phone away. I'm not saying I did this perfectly or do this perfectly. There's many, many times it doesn't, but the goal is to put the phone fully away until they go to bed at night. And then if I need to check it again, that's when I check it, get back to everyone I need to get back to, and then it goes away again because I'm not strong enough. The phone is so addictive. I know, like no one is strong enough. It's been created to be this addictive. None of us are strong enough to actually just have it there and be perfectly like not going to it all the time. And so if you create some kind of, even if you work outside of the home, you might not have thought about those types of boundaries before, but thinking about like, how can I put it aside? If there are certain times that you know you're getting a phone call or something's happening, you can just communicate that with your children. But in general, creating those kind of, these are when it's on, these are when it's off. That's also setting a really healthy example for our older middle schoolers and teens. Once they do get their own phone, they look at it and they say, oh, this is how we interact with this device. Look at mum and dad. This is how they've done it. And so I think that that's a really great thing to create some boundaries ourselves.
Good for you. Okay, I love this. Now, let's talk about the reality of putting the phone
Yes.
down. It is
Yes.
such a pull, I admit. I'm going to just own it. It's a pull for me because I feel
Yes.
like I got to respond to that text. What if there's an emergency? I've got all these things in my head. Now, I think the reality is like that sounds good in theory
Right.
because now I'm afraid I'm going to miss something. How do you help someone really say, how do they do this in action? We say, okay, just do it. But how do they work through that pull in their own impulse inside of
Yes.
them to stick with it?
One of the practices I talk about in the book is a technology Sabbath, where you take one day a week and you turn off all screens. Now, that may sound really extreme, so you could start with a few hours, but I often suggest to start it on a day that you maybe a day on the weekend. You don't have that like, well, if I don't get back to that text message, my boss is going to, so there's not that level of stuff. I also want to preface it, whenever you start to detach from technology that is in and of itself addictive, you're stimulating all the neurotransmitters that come with addiction. So if you think about someone who is addicted to substances, there is a physical withdrawal that happens if they were to remove those substances. Although it's not as extreme as that, technology, particularly when we've been in ongoing use of it 100 times a day, when you step away from that, there is still a physical sensation that is really, really uncomfortable. There's also a lot of times emotions come up of like exactly what you said, all the feelings. Am I going to miss out? The fear. You realize sometimes just how exhausted you are. And so one of the things I suggest is even potentially getting a lockbox or putting the phone in a drawer and asking your spouse or partner or someone to hide it for a few hours, because then you can't get it. You want to put yourself in a position where you can't get it for a few hours. And then when you have that technology Sabbath and your whole nervous system begins to calm down, you will actually come back to the phone use not as frantic and frenetic. You'll actually come back a lot more calm. You've detached from that ongoing dopamine loop, essentially, of that addiction. And so it helps to calm your nervous system down. And so for many people, the lockbox works really well. Asking someone to hide their phone works really well. And also just understanding that those feelings that come up, that fear of missing out, the fear of that, that's actually an emotion you need to pay attention to. It's not a signal that you should pick up the phone again. That's actually something that you need to look at and say, hey, that's really driving me at the moment. Why is that driving me so much? I'm here. I have this beautiful family, these children. Why am I looking to this so much? And I think it's a good opportunity to realize, hey, maybe I'm moving towards a direction I don't want to move towards. And it helps you kind of realign and come back to center.
This is such an important message to turn down the noise. It is such an important message. And I know we always blame technology and social media. This is not what this is about. This is deeper. It's like with anything, with any addiction or something we move towards, I'm like, what are you moving away from? What is it you're moving away from? And it's so readily accessible. And to turn down the noise and the overstimulation, I think has to be a part of the conversation. I just think it has to be part of the conversation. I don't think we could get around your book title without this. Do you agree?
100%, because I think about in our generation's childhood, if we were to go away on vacation, whether we would go camping or maybe we would even go and stay at someone's home, the most technology we would have is maybe a television that would play a show that came on at 5 p.m. every day. And if you missed 5 p.m., you missed the show. And so I say to parents, imagine I magically transported you back to that time. And I said, right now you have a week off in that environment. How would that feel? How would that feel for you, for your children? And most people, even though it might spike a little bit of anxiety, will I miss out? Most of us have this feeling of like, oh, that would be unbelievable. And in that situation, all that we've removed is technology, is that ability for someone to be contacted all the time, the sense that we can contact or be connected to anyone all the time. And so I think that really speaks to just how much the technology is driving us and our sense of this interconnectedness that we have with the world now, which has created amazing work opportunities and career and helps us reach more people. The downside of it is that we feel like we're interconnected with all these people, maybe not in our real life. And also we feel this ongoing perpetual need to keep up with everything. So it causes us to run at a pace in our life that if we were to remove all of that, I don't know that we would be running at the same pace, even if we had a very demanding life.
I agree. Because you feel like you're on call, especially if your work is connected to it.
Yes.
You feel like you've got to respond, because if you don't respond, then someone's going to think you're not doing your job. We have all these. When we were working 20 years ago, we weren't on call all the time. We left our computers at the office. There wasn't even laptops, or they were just coming on the line. And that it was separated for the most part, unless you're a doctor and you're on call and something like that. But you left your computer and that was it.
Yeah.
Now it's with you. So I think if someone's listening to this episode and says, okay, I want to take one thing away, I want to make one change. Do you think having boundaries for yourself around the phone and putting it away and doing a sabbatical one day a week would be the thing that you would recommend to turn down the noise? Like, what would be the top recommendation and maybe the top 3?
Yeah. So I definitely think putting your own phone away and creating boundaries, because that's a cascading habit or practice. Because when you do that, you naturally are more present with your family. You're naturally more creating boundaries for them not to have their phones and screens out. And you're naturally more connecting. So I would say 100% looking at your own phone and technology use would be a huge thing. I think the other practice, 2 other ones I would look at, is just the pace that we're running through our days. I think sometimes we're not aware of, our body is not created to run at the pace ongoingly. So you can do it for short stints of a time. But if you do it, you need times of recovery as well. And the third thing, and this is something that people don't often connect with overstimulation, but is I think we need to create more space for joy in our lives. A play expert, Dr. Stuart Brown, he talks about play as being really important to us actually experiencing joy in our life. We're so obsessed with productivity that we don't ever do anything that we enjoy just for enjoyment's sake anymore. And so when you think about yourself being fully, your nervous system is at peace, you are relaxed, you typically then laugh more, you're more lighthearted, you typically do things that you enjoy. And that is a sign that the nervous system is at rest. And so if we can actually do and allow space for more things like that, it actually helps bolster our resilience and bolster our capacity to deal with stress so that we can navigate the stress and overstimulation in our life. So that's 3 things there.
I love those 3 things. How does someone access more joy? I have a lot of clients who are like, I don't even know what brings me joy. They've lost themselves. They've even lost a connection to access that emotion. They feel like they have. So how does someone access more joy in play?
Yeah, it's a great question because I feel like part of what stress does, and particularly if it's been for years, it creates a life that you believe is serious all the time. And work, you just start going into a mindset of thinking, I just need to get through this. These are all my responsibilities, and the load feels heavy. So I completely understand most people come, especially even in parenthood, you get to a point where you've just been supplying and being there for your children and being there for all of their needs that you get to a point of like, I don't even know what I love anymore. If you gave me an hour off, I probably would just sleep, or I don't know what I would do. I think it's important with joy to think about, to not assume everyone's different. So I think sometimes when we think about joy, we think that we should be like extroverted and really excited and laughing all the time. But joy can be as simple as any activity that you find enjoyable. So I would encourage people to think back to, what did you used to love to do when you were a child? What were those activities that you would absorb your time? Because joy is not just about an elated feeling. It's actually about a feeling of you've lost track of time. So for some people, it's reading a book. For some people, it's playing sport. It's maybe cooking or gardening. It doesn't have to be Disneyland and fireworks and balloons. It's literally can be, what's the thing that you do that makes you begin to feel like time is going past and you didn't notice? You didn't notice that time has gone on. So I think about is, what was that thing in childhood that made you feel like the time was passing?
What was yours?
For me, it was always reading and writing. I was always reading books and writing lots of things. I think that, and that's the same for me now. One of my favorite things to do if I have time off is read a book. One of my favorite things to do, even with my kids, is we have a book club, we call it, even though it's just us and our kids. And we read all our favorite books together. How about
Love
you?
that. My daughter's read 154 books last year.
Wow.
But it started in childhood. Like I introduced her to books early. She took a liking to it. I love books. Like I have stacks of books. I'm like, I need to just library it.
Yeah.
But I used to roller skate in our driveway
Oh,
to music. I don't know if you remember Olivia Newton-John, but it was
yes.
Olivia Newton-John and Xanadu, and I'd be in the driveway and I just did my roller skating and I was in my own world. I was in my own world, but I have not even thought about that question you asked. Like, what did you like to do as a child for fun? And some people can't come up with something, and that's okay. So if
Yes.
you don't, just know that's okay. But it sparked that memory. I was like, I haven't thought about roller skating in a long time.
You need to get them out.
I
You need
know.
to get your
Well, yeah,
roller
I need to
skates
get my.
out.
We're gonna put on Xanadu, and I'm gonna get in our driveway, and I'll do a routine for you. So it's fun to think about, and because I like reading too. So people think, well, some people then judge whether that's an acceptable thing,
Yes.
right? That is that really
100%.
count?
Well, I used to always think that too, because I'm an introvert. Like my husband's extroverted. He's the one always doing the exciting big activities. And so I would always think, well, I must be boring. That doesn't really count as something. But when I saw the definition of it being, it's not about having this. If you're extroverted and that's you, like you need to own that and feel good about that. But for those of us that are maybe more quiet or introverted or stuff, it's actually just about finding, if I gave you right now 3 hours off and took your phone away, what would you do that you would end the 3 hours and think, that was quite nice. That was nice for me. I feel restored internally. I feel like the world feels good again. It feels like I can keep going. That's the activities. And it can be as simple as sitting and having a coffee on your front porch or having a cup of tea. It doesn't have to be complicated. It's just that we are so stressed and running at such a pace. And then as parents, we're then turning around with the only capacity we have left and giving it all to our children, that when we do that for week on week on week, on year on year on year, we get to a point where we don't have any bandwidth left. And these practices of joy, of just creating a little bit of space for yourself, is actually so important, even so that you can show up for all the other people in your life. You're not a machine. You can't just turn on a button and just go forever. You're going to hit a wall at some point. And so these practices kind of help us stay true to ourselves, come back to center, come back to peace, and help us be healthy people for the children and adolescents in our world.
Yes. This is the reset. Like if you take anything away from this episode, think about resetting your nervous system. And then what things do you need to change to make this sustainable? So it's one thing to listen to a podcast. You're like, that's great. Yes, I'm going to do that. And then you do it for, because I'm guilty of this. I do it for like, oh, yeah, that's really good. And I go on about my same routine. And if you decide, you know what, I do want to recommit to windows of time, maybe it's even an hour a day where you're putting your phone away and you're maybe, I have a friend now, she's into making like flower arrangements. I'm like, good for you. I mean, that's fantastic. So you find your thing. And maybe that's your way of resetting your nervous system and noticing how your body feels.
Yes, that's amazing. I love that you shared that about your friend, because I think so much in our social media world, we assume that, well, if I'm going to do flower arranging or if I'm going to paint a picture, I have to be good enough to show it on social media, good enough to make it a side business, good enough to do it. And that's not the point of it. The point of it is just, you've created something. There's something renewing in being part of the act of creating something, whether or not other people deem it as good or not, because we're trying to move ourselves away from this productivity cycle of trying to produce this amazing thing all the time. I love that. I love that your friend does flower arranging.
Yeah. She was like, this is my new thing. And I was like, well, good. That's awesome. Like, I want to hear all about it. I want to see her rate. Like, you don't have to show me unless you want to, but I was like really excited for her to have this. And she was so excited. That got me excited just to kind of be the empathic witness to that.
Yes.
Okay. This is my favorite question. And so I didn't prep you ahead of time.
Okay.
What has been the most impactful book you've read? It can be anything. It doesn't have to be about the subject that has made the most impact in your life. It could be one or two or whatever comes to your mind.
Oh, goodness. This is
a very, very hard question. It's like picking your favorite baby. And I'm like,
I think one that sticks out to me that's coming to my mind right now, I will say there's so many, is The Brain That Changes Itself. I think the author is Norman Doidge. He basically talks about the brain's capacity for neuroplasticity and shares multiple examples in real life about how people have maybe had traumatic brain injuries or something and how they've been able to rewire them. I was so impressed by that book because I think it just speaks of brain's capacity to change and adapt and restore after something that's been difficult or hard. So that's one that comes to mind. But I will say I have a whole book, so now I'm going to go back and think of 10 more.
I know. That's how I was. Somebody asked me that question. I was like, I blurted out the first thing. And I'm like, well, wait, there's other ones that are. So just know this was the one meant to be for right now that you were meant to share. So and no one's ever said that one. I just started this question a couple months ago. So I love it. So this isn't one I haven't heard. So I'm excited to check it out. Is there anything you wanted to share that you feel like is important that we didn't cover?
No, I think we covered a great breadth of things. I think and I love the way that you framed it, because my heart with this book is not at all to make parents feel guilty or shame. The whole point of it is to be an empathetic guide, to actually just walk alongside us. We're all in this together. No one is getting it right or perfect all the time. It's just to open the conversation, to suggest some ideas and practices, and hopefully companion people along the journey.
I am so glad you wrote this book, and you have such a light about you. I just want to say that. I interview a lot of people, and you just have a really good loving, caring, warm heart about you. And I would just really encourage people to get this book, because this is one thing that I want to say before we close our conversation out, is when you can self-reflect and we can own, it's time for us all to own our own relationship with social media and our phones and technology. It's time. It's time for us all to rumble with the truth. No one gets out of this category. I really believe that. I mean, even the grandparents are on their phone. I mean, we're really, and not to say because of anything about grandparents, because I love them and they're really savvy. And we all need to start rumbling with our own relationship with it. And it's time. And if we can really be honest with ourselves, that's the only way we're going to change this within ourselves. Because it's really it. I mean, it's it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, awareness and honesty about that is the first step of changing something. You can't change anything if you're not aware of it being a problem, or being honest with yourself about where it's up to. And again, no shame or guilt, but at the same time, we don't want to not have the conversation because it brings up difficult feelings sometimes.
Yes. And I just want to say yes to this. Thank you, Sarah, for being on the podcast. Where can people find you? If they're like, I really like her, I want to get her book, where can they find you? I will link it in the show notes too.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. So I'm just Sarah Boyd, sarahboyd.co at my website and on socials. And also I run Resilient Little Hearts for those of you that have children and adolescents, or you're a grandparent or a teacher or a professional who work with children. And that's where I share content relating to children and childhood development.
I love it. And you have quite a big following, which excites me. I'm like, that's amazing on Instagram, at least. I was like, look.
Yeah.
Fantastic. People are thirsty for this. So I appreciate you and the work you're doing in the world. Thank you for joining us today. You are a delight. And go grab the book, turn down the noise, and you can have that song in your head when you buy the book and do a little dance and get a little joy in your life. So thank you, Sarah.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been a joy.
Thank you so much for listening to the Close the Chapter podcast. My hope is that you took home some actionable steps along with motivation, inspiration, and hope for making sustainable change in your life. If you enjoyed this episode, click the subscribe button to be sure to get the updated episodes every week, and share with a friend or a family member. For more information about how to get connected, visit Kristen, Kristen, Boyce, Boice.com. Thanks and have a great day.